Um, I think it's the rainy season here. We have 4 seasons here in the almost the whole Congo Basin. We have 2 small rainy and hot season and dry season, and then we have 2 very intense rainy and dry seasons. So yeah, and they are consecutive to one another.
No wonder.
What about you there?
Oh, we have almost 6 seasons in India, and we're like about the last part of summer and waiting for monsoons.
Okay.
It will be another 10 days to a fortnight where most of India will start. And the monsoons start from the southern side of India, so they will start going up. So that's what we're waiting for. Nitinji, can we start?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm open to starting already.
Perfect. Before we start, Mr. May, let me give you a little background of what VONG is. VONG is a movement initiated by Orion Square, which is again an initiative of the Omisha Foundation. Now, VONG seeks to bolster the voices of the young, the new generation, and we're trying to do this because we think this will accelerate the adoption of sustainable practices on a global scale. Because everywhere in the world, it's lobby, and the new generation is going to be the best lobby, the best voice, we feel. We're also trying to bolster a deeper understanding of global social issues so that the youngsters and the new generation can influence social attitudes. So towards that, today we would be talking about something that you are connected with, which is wildlife and forests and conservation. Before we get into this topic, Mr. May, if I were to ask you, okay, let me first make a confession. I am complete urbanite. You show me 2 different kind of leaves. Unless you point out, I can't make out the differences. That's how bad an urbanite I am. I have grown up in the concrete jungle. So if there was someone like me and they were to ask you, what have I got to do with wildlife? Why is it important to me? I have seen one only on Discovery Channel. So why is it very important that youth everywhere, in every kind of setting, should be bothered about wildlife, should be bothered about conservation of wildlife? Why is it important? What would you say?
Okay. Thank you for giving me the floor. I am Christian May. I'm living in Cameroon. I'm a forest technician, and I'm currently pursuing a PhD degree in University of Yaoundé in Cameroon in botany and ecology. I'm also a wildlife geographer and mostly specializing in social conservation, social sciences. What I would say is that wildlife is very important to mankind because of the environmental and ecological services that it provides to human life. We have so many diverse services, like services of support in regulating the climate. And when we talk about wildlife, it's not just about animals, but it's also about plants, fungi, and all those natural creatures that we might find occurring in the wild. Every and each of them provide a specific service that we directly or indirectly benefit. So we have to take care. We have to make sure all wildlife species are preserved. And moreover, all wildlife species occur in their natural milieu within a very balanced rate. Knowing or unknowing the service they provide. If I take, for instance, trees are part of wildlife. And for us, trees provide shelter. They fertilize the soil. And after a soil has been fertilized, we will come and plant crops, maize, banana, and they will grow. But if we cut all trees for timber production, after a few years, 2 to 10 years, the soil will become infertile. So they also participate, they contribute to stabilizing the soil, and animals will also play a very important role because they will eat seeds, they will eat fruits, and move with seeds to be fertilizing and to be planting new trees in very diverse areas. So some animal species are very specific to some particular fruits. enabling the fertilization, but also the germination of new seed and new plants into new areas. So there exists this undoubtable interconnection between wildlife species, given that they are animal, vegetal, fungi, and all other. There is an existing connection between all wildlife species, and it's all creating the balance in the world that we human beings will benefit from. So it's very important to have them conserved, out of the fact that every species deserves to remain existing, out of the fact that we humans must make sure environment does not disturb or suppress, delete completely the existence of some species. We have to make sure that the environmental and ecological services granted by every wildlife species is preserved, giving the possibility for present and next generation to have their needs fulfilled. I would say that is the definition of sustainable management or sustainable development. Sustainable development being a development in which we make sure we fulfill our present needs, taking care not to delete or to disturb the future generation needs as well. So going further the question of environmental services, our duty to preserve wildlife species is to make sure the existence of our humankind does not disturb that of the other existing in the wild.
Okay, so you're saying this is required for sustainability, for sustainable human life itself on this planet.
Yes.
I read somewhere, Mr. May, that forests, the very nature of forests is changing due to urbanization. Can you please explain that to me?
The world as a whole, I would say the world as a whole is constantly changing. Constantly. If I take the case of some forests here in Cameroon, where the country is divided into a southern part that is really a forest part, and the savanna and the close to desert part. So we have that area where the forest meet that is constantly changing due to activity, due to forest animal migrating from forest to savanna and bringing new seeds, but also due to the variation of climate. You know that we are today talking about climate changes, but climate changes, as we know it today, is a kind of addition between an inclusion due to human activities, but also due to the natural variability of climate. So the natural variability of climate, of rains, but of elevation has a very significant impact on the ecology of milieus, thus on the change in natural forest and savanna. So you might have some areas that may be forest today, but in 100 time period is completely transformed into a changing environment. Some of the places that were known in my country here as forest are progressively becoming some savanna areas, while some savanna areas are being changed and transformed into forest area. That's why I was exactly talking about the interconnection within the nature. This interconnection, this link between all existing matters is the one we should care about. It's the reason why we should make sure wildlife is always preserved, but also the change you are just talking about now is the reason why we should adapt ourselves, because given the fact that with as season move, nature moves as well. Some generation during 100 or 200 years can develop agricultural calendars, for instance. That doesn't mean those calendars are fixed in time, because time moves, and with time moving, wildlife will change, ecology will change, forest areas, savannas will change. So we human beings have to be constantly adapting ourselves to those changes, making sure that we live with the changes and we adapt ourselves.
But Mr. May, isn't some species going extinct part of nature? I mean, species keep going extinct and newer species evolve. We've read Darwin's Law, which says that there is survival of the fittest. Should we be then so bothered about keeping all species alive?
Yeah, I would say that Darwin described the natural evolution of species, and within the extinction, the movement of extinctions of species, we have the natural or stochastic extinctions, and we have the anthropogenic causes of extinctions. They are indeed, because of the fact that we are in this constant evolution we're talking about, some species are being transformed into others. Like, for instance, I'm black, you are white. There have been many years of changes and evolution for our very skin colors to change and evolve, to specify into one and to something else. So this stochastic extension of species do exist, but due to our very short time of existence on Earth, it's very difficult for us to perceive it. And something else is that the true trait to extinction, it's the one due to human beings. Because if we read in the story of natural evolution, there are very rare the cases of extinction that can be clearly visible, that clearly marked the story of existence in our planet. So stochastic extinction exists, but they are very difficult to perceive, because one species will within a movement of millions of years transform into another or create new others. But what we talk about here is the extension happening into decades, into years, and due to anthropogenic activity. That's what is the problem.
So you're saying as long as it is nature's evolution, it's not a problem. If we are causing it, then we are causing nature as well as ourselves harm. We are inviting trouble.
Exactly. We are causing a very sudden extension, because within the frame of progressive evolution, especially granting a particular environmental service will certainly bring about new subspecies able to grant a similar one, or other species around the main species will certainly be able to grant that environmental species a service, or the other species, being human or animal or plant, will certainly adapt progressively to the restriction or the diminution of the service, the environmental service that is provided. But the problem we are talking about here is the fact that anthropogenic activity delete an environmental services, depriving a lot of species, including human beings, used to benefiting from a particular service. That may be shelter, that may be climate regulation, that may be soil fertilization, soil stability, and so forth and so on. So that's the real difference. Natural regulation takes time and is a real regulation within which balance is preserved. But anthropogenic activity do not always grant the balance that is needed for everything to continue happening without trouble.
Okay. But does climate change also impact wildlife? Like, we are hearing stories, even in India, there are areas which were like drought prone or desertified areas. Now they get flood rainfall. They're like really raining. And there are areas which used to go into floods every year, and now there is no rainfall there. So is this also affecting wildlife, or are they more adept at acclimatizing themselves than we are? Is wildlife
Thank you. It will certainly affect wildlife.
Okay.
Yes. Wildlife is a species. Wildlife are a group. They are species, so they will certainly be also affected by climate changes because of their sudden aspect. Because of their sudden aspect, the climate change will also have a significant influence on forest. We can see, for instance, the intensity of bushfires in other countries, even in Amazon. I think 1 to 2 years ago, you heard about the intensive bushfires that occurred in Amazon. That is supposed to be a evergreen forest that's not supposed to be having bushfires, but due to climate changes, the phenomenon is happening, and with very severe impact on environment. So climate change are a threat to both humans and wildlife species. They are a real threat that no one can ignore now because they bring a very sudden change, and nature is not adapted to be swallowing sudden changes.
This is very it is profound that you've told us that nature is very good at adapting to change, but not swallowing sudden change. If nature
Yes.
initiates the change, it adapts to it in all forms. But if we initiate the change, nature does not adapt to it because it is artificial. It is not created by itself.
Exactly.
Yes, yes. Mr. May, could you tell me what is this agroforestry then? Because while we were talking, you were mentioning to us if you're going to cut down trees for timber and turn it into farm cycles, and then farming cycles or farming calendar also does not remain the same. Then what is agroforestry? Is it something that is doing something good for forests?
Okay. To me, as I previously told you, though I'm basically a forestry technician, my aspiration is to work into conservation social sciences. And to me, agroforestry seems to be the future of real conservation that integrate the needs for production. Agroforestry is an agricultural system that include trees as a potential to bring about some key environmental, but also economical, financial, and also social or cultural services to a production system. So exclusive and very close conservation that doesn't grant the rights of communities to accessing natural milieu and having their needs fulfilled will be very difficult to be successful. Meanwhile, a conservation system, a conservation system that integrates production needs, cultural needs of communities will bring about more success. Agroforestry is therefore an agricultural practice that integrates trees as a potential to bring about sustainable facilities and services. I'll talk about Caliandra calotensis, Leucaena leucocephala, many species that integrated into field will bring about more fertilization within the agricultural production service. Something that cannot be done if we choose to separate production services, production systems from conservation system. So agroforestry brings about possibility. Like we have that problem here in most of rainforest countries and regions, like with cocoa production, coffee production, banana production, that are most of the time unique agricultural production. It's very simple. I can see the article that I published in 2021. The loss into fertilization comes into banana production system after 5 years, and the place is abandoned and the new forest is cut for a new production. Or the worst is that people will refer to artificial fertilizers. Meanwhile, agroforestry system based on cocoa, based on banana, based on coffee, in which trees are introduced, grants, first of all, wildlife species occurrence, enabling people, for those who eat bushmeat, to continue having bushmeat, but also enabling them to have fire for firewood, enabling them to have fertilization of their milieu, but also to conserve this shelter, this natural climate that they used to have in a natural forest. So they will less depend on fertilizers, on artificial products to fight against pests and all those microbes destroying their plants. That's the benefits of agroforestry, is really that if it is true that it doesn't grant the best production in terms of quantity, it grants in terms of quality and sustainability the production of agricultural services that are provided, that are carried out.
Okay. Now, Mr. May, this is a question that I think you are the right person to answer. In India, we have a lot of communities which we tend to call tribal communities. These are communities who have lived in jungles, for whom jungle is their habitat. That is where they survive. That is where they live. There is also a huge part of our policy makers who believe that these people are harming the forest, hence should not be given access to the forest. So this is a constant tussle. One side saying that this is my culture and I need to be given access to it. Other side saying you are overusing the jungles or you're commercializing it and you're harming them, hence you cannot be given access. Do you think that agroforestry or permaculture is an answer to this tussle, constant tussle? And can this replace jungles in the end? Or no, you have to have pure jungles at some point?
I think that agroforestry, as I said, is the future of conservation. Agroforestry systems are the future landscapes that we'll see everywhere. Human population is just increasing, and nature to regenerate takes hundreds of years. Now, economy and politics have their visible impact on the future of the world. So it's very difficult for people to apply real conservation measures. And it also calls on ethics. How can we be ethics when we ask people who are living in their natural milieu, who have been preserving their natural milieu, to leave those milieux to come and stay with us in places that we transformed and where they will be poor because we already benefited from everything natural that used to exist in the milieu we live in now. So somehow, such a pure and 100% conservation might maybe guarantee the existence of natural forest, but it's not going to be ethic, and it's not going to be long lasting, because after a certain time, those indigenous communities who have left their natural milieu to come and live in town, who will be taken care of maybe during 5 years, and after a certain time will be facing poverty, will certainly return to their natural milieu and start to carry out poaching and all sorts of illegal wildlife exploitation activities. It is a fact that Professor Knox Makunga from the University of Johannesburg presented in her previous work on medicinal plants. The fact that the reality that once a non-sustainable, non-integrated, and non-participatory creation of protected area is engaged, community will always enter the forest and start harming it as if they were trying to get everything harvested by them before the federal state or the central state takes everything in control. So if agroforestry can be a solution, integrated management of natural areas and habitat and species is the key. Indigenous communities with their specificities, with their cultures, have to be part of the process. They must be integrated into the decision-making processes. And moreover, conservation should not be something that is imported top-down, but bottom-up. We should base on their understanding of conservation. We should create conservation going from their need to conserve the area because they are the owners, they are the real inhabitants and the real protectors of the place. So yes, agroforestry can be a solution, but a solution to be implemented within a participatory management system where communities are put in the center, where their needs are understood, where their needs generate or launch the conservation process as a whole. Wow, that's part of the work I've been carried out with Professor Meredith Gore. I think last March we published a document on the indigenous Baka women perception of conservation in Cameroon, because here we also have that room of natural marginalization of indigenous communities and the implementation of top-down conservation measures. Of the time, conservation is understood a certain way in Europe, in America, and those understandings that are good somehow for conservation are implemented here, ignoring the reality and specificities of those communities living there, who cannot from a sudden abandon their gods, abandon their ancestors, abandon their tribe, their culture, and also their security of life in a system they understand, to start within a new system where they will have no land title, no houses, no specific training and abilities to have a new job. So we have those two facts that contrast in our implementation of conservation, and it's also something that we have been working on for a short while.
Before we go ahead, Mr. May, I will say one thing. Your introduction of yourself was very, very lopsided, sir. You are not someone who understands only forests and wildlife. You understand societies, you understand cultures, you understand coexistence, you understand policy. You have been very unfair in introducing yourself to us. You are a person with a lot of facets.
Thank you.
And what you are talking about sounds to me like a very win-win situation, because in India, and I have knowledge that in many parts of Asia, this coexistence of indigenous communities and so-called urban policymakers has turned into violent fights and breakouts. It's turned into a law and order situation. Whereas what you were saying about promoting agroforestry bottom up with participation of the community looks like something that will address everybody's needs, at the same time will be sustainable.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. We need something sustainable, but also that it's participatory, to make sure we integrate every actor's specificity and need. And moreover, the actors of the field, the first victims if the system is not sustainable, because they will be the first victims. Decision makers most of the time live in town. They have jobs, salaries, cars, families, everything out of the natural milieu. So decisions that are to be taken must take into consideration the first victim of an unfair applied system. They must be the one in the center. Otherwise, we'll have general failures. And in Cameroon here, since 2016, we have had so many conflicts between rangers, central decision makers, and indigenous communities. So many of them. The International World Wildlife Fund for Nature, WWF, have been having a lot of trouble in the country due to its participation to anti-poaching activities that were reported as harming indigenous communities. So it's very important for indigenous communities to be at the center of all measures that are to be taken considering conservation. It's a must. Otherwise, we'll start with projects, we'll start with measures, but after a while, failure and failure. I think there is one report published in 2016 by Rainforest UK presenting the general failure of protected area conservation and management in the whole Congo basin. It was reported as a failure due to the non-integration and non-participation of local and indigenous communities, having as a direct impact the loss in wildlife, the loss in landscape, and also the loss in natural species. So having wildlife management being inclusive and participatory is a must. It's not a choice or a possibility. It's a must, or we'll just forget about conservation and species as a whole, because decision makers with codes cannot be traveling all the time in village to be looking for villagers. We don't know, we central conservators don't know the villages. We don't know the wildlife species. We don't know their occurrence and abundance in natural milieus. They are the ones who have the knowledge, that ethnobotanic and ethnozoonic zoologic knowledge. We are supposed to be working with them. And another problem that I might raise here is the impact of conservation. Here in my country, it's being observed the progressive rise into local organizations, because it has been proven that with time, international and huge organizations do not well address the question of conservation because of their distance from the milieu, their distance from the working and conservation sites. It is a solution that has to be brought by locals themselves, the ones in the milieu, the ones facing the changes and the challenges. They are the ones supposed to be at the center of all operation. Okay. But also, maybe something that can be forgotten is this very important interdisciplinarity. Conservation by ecologists cannot bring a sustainable solution to the preservation of wildlife because it integrates a lot of science. We have to understand the specificities of communities. You people there are working with indigenous people in India. I am an ecologist. I can know the wildlife species of India, but I cannot know the specificities of Indian indigenous communities. It is very important to know their family structure, their socio-demographical structure, their culture, their gods. How many animals do they need to sacrifice if they need to sacrifice animals? All those specificities are important for us to address, to carry out with success our conservation work, to carry out conservation work with more efficiency. So, and this can only come if we bring together ecology, geography, sociology, anthropology, philosophy, psychology, all those things giving us the ability to understand the society, to understand even the primary, local and indigenous society, and now bringing about a clear link between their needs, their projection in time and in space, and our aim to conserve wildlife and biodiversity. It is only by bringing all those sciences together, or all those scientists on the table, that will certainly understand the need for community to be put at the center of conservation discussion, I think.
So, Mr. May, so far, what you have told us has kind of made us understand that wildlife conservation or conservation of forests isn't about just climate change or ecology or a fashionable discussion around the dinner table. It actually goes to the heart of sociology, culture, economics, very stability and peace of nations, because if we keep on pushing indigenous communities, we are not far away from strife. So it is
exactly. And then we have cases. We do have cases of civil conflicts, and yes, we have real conflicts between rangers and communities, because you cannot ask somebody who is starving not to eat because you want to conserve a wildlife species. Impossible. You have to provide a solution. So if there are fundings, for instance, fundings should be addressed to those communities where we want natural extraction to be stopped or reduced. So, okay, we as ecologists cannot be working alone without agriculturists. We need agriculturists, we need banks, those who provide money and agriculture, foods and goods to be working alongside with us, so that when the ecologists will say, please stop cutting, the agriculture will say, this is food, the finance will say, this is money, and this are means for you to take your children to school. These are drugs to take care of yourself. If I can no longer cut backs, I have one tree species, that is Pioneer Toxisperma pear, that I've been planting in my school, the Permaculture Forest Reserve, since 2014, because all the trees existing there are being destroyed by the local communities. The back of the tree are very important for therapeutical treatments. They have this, how can I say in English? They have this medicinal value, very important medicinal value against malaria, but also against a lot of sexually transmitted diseases. So the need for community to use the tree species has to be understood. We have either to bring a medical solution or to plant more trees to address the progressive extension or trait on the species. So it goes beyond the ecology knowledge. For its real implementation, it needs the other sciences and discipline to be associated to the scheme.
I completely resonate with what you're saying. We are the land of Ayurveda. We believe in plant medicine and have an entire science going behind it. There in one of India's cities, there is a family which for 4 generations have been Ayurvedic doctors. And the current generation doctor was once telling me that the situation is reached that I cannot guarantee I will get the same herb in the same form every 15 days, because that is how scarce things have become, or that is how quickly forests or these plantations are disappearing. Now, Mr. May, if something is so important and so fundamental that it is touching everybody's life, even someone living in an urban jungle like me, tell me, what should urban citizens do to play a meaningful role in conservation, in wildlife conservation? What should they do? What is their role?
I think there are many things to be done, and it depends on the sociology of every country, every society. Many things are done already, like supporting organizations like yours. That's one thing to be done. A very symbolic gift, 1 rupee, 10 rupee, $1 to support conservation. But the fundamental thing is for urban citizens to understand the reality of conservation and its importance for social balance. If everybody remains external to the dialogue, to the discussion of conservation, we will never have a real impact. Visiting natural parks is not just about tourism. It is more about general awareness. People moving from cities, entering parks, having fresh air, having good time with animals and natural areas will understand the importance of conservation. People taking 2 hours, 3 hours to read a little bit about conservation and ecological services will understand the importance of conservation. And after all those two fundamental things come now gifts, sharing, but also creating at the level of their urban area small non-profit organization that can plant trees in town, that can support fund leverage to make sure that local and international organizations working and supporting conservation have all the means they need to carry out their activities with success. But something else is also that in town, people have to change the way they use energy. Is it fossil energy? Are there biofuels? A real destruction of environment in rural areas, in forest, is generated by the need that are expressed in town. We'll produce 200 tons of rice and also a quarter, 2/4, or at most 3/4 will be eaten. Part of it will be thrown. A forest will have been destroyed, not for a complete efficiency. So our consumption rate has to be more responsible in terms of wood that is used, the reutilization of everything we have, of waste management, good utilization. All those things are affect conservation in the wild. So it is very important that people, citizens in town, take care of the way they consume to make sure the impact of natural milieu during the production process is reduced.
Okay, so you're basically saying a common citizen can first and foremost, and in very simple, touching ways, change their consumption patterns to be more responsible, reduce wastage, reduce whatever that.
Exactly.
So that is something that everybody can do. I mean, literally everybody can do. My 5-year-old niece can do. That is how simple but yet profound something that is. Then you were also saying that we create small urban NGOs which plant trees or do what is trendily called urban afforestation. We could also become, and another thing that I think very hitting is that you say that we support the organizations, we donate, yes, but we also understand the reality of what is required when we say conservation, and all of us should
Exactly.
and all of us should become insiders to this conversation and not remain bystanders or not remain outsiders, because it is about everybody.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so Mr. May, here I am going to ask you to make us insiders. Tell me what VONG as a movement can do. Firstly, tell me what is your idea of what we are trying to do. Does it make sense? And I'm going to invite you to please be frank. Is it making sense? Do you see value? And also tell us how we can be insiders to this conversation. How can we do something, or how can we motivate these youngsters who are the tomorrow to be part of this conversation, to channelize that much energy? So one thing at VONG that even today we were having a conversation. One thing at VONG that we have in plenty is a lot of youthful energy, a lot of youthful passion, energy, a lot of it waiting to be streamlined. So tell us how we can be insiders to this conversation. What can we do for conservation of wildlife, conservation of forests?
Thank you. I'll first of all say that I've gone through Wong's page on Instagram and Facebook and also the website, and I really appreciate the work that is being done. And it's not only in conservation; it goes in education, health, and it touches a lot. It is very important to raise social awareness, and more especially concerning youth, because we are, as they call it in forestry, we are the future generation. So the outstanding work that one is being carried out now is of very consequential importance for the future governance, and especially as we are talking about it for conservation and the future of natural milieu and their regeneration. I've particularly appreciated the way I was approached by Wong online. I think it was something very, a hazard. It just happened. And I was 2 days later invited to take part to this conference. And I think that is what conservation has to be about: raising people's attention. We didn't go through very civilian procedures, taking weeks and months. After a few days, you invited me to give something to talk about conservation. I think it is not very formal. It doesn't take time. It doesn't gather a lot of means and a lot of procedures. And that's exactly how to bring a solution into conservation. Conservation today has also become, I would say, a kind of market where everybody will come and wear a badge, an ideology, a concept. I think that Wong is going further. Wong is working out of that concept, not caring about taking a very known person, but caring to talk about somebody who can bring about ideas, no matter who he is, no matter what is his level, because everybody at a certain level has impact on the conservation, on the future of natural resources, on the future of the planet. So I will encourage the organization to go ahead, appreciating already what is being done, working with schools, working with youth in schools, in university, in social medias, inviting more of them to participate at their level. With my organization, Bamboo Forest Conservation, I work with students, inviting them to produce at least one plant per year. Very simple. I will give one seed and one plastic sachet. Very simple. I'll come 6 months later. Please show me your efforts. Show me the plant you have produced after that set of time. And I think that's down to earth process, that down to earth procedure that your organization is using, following, is what needs to be done to make sure at the ground level, conservation solutions are found, because that is exactly what we need. Conservation is not to be carried out only during conferences and symposia. No, it is due during these down to earth activities that your organization struggles to carry out, inviting even the primary schools, even the secondary school, those in the university, the women in their houses, showing them how what they will neglect as action can bring about more impact in conservation that they could have expected. So I really appreciate the work that VONG is doing. And I think that more organizations as this one will bring about consequential response to climate change and biodiversity loss as we face it today.
Okay, while Mr. May is speaking, I'm going to request everybody in the conference to type out in the chat any questions they may have to ask Mr. May, so we can ask him. And I'm going to encourage all of you to do that quickly, because experts like him are not easy to get, and we shouldn't let him go off without answering all our questions.
Hello?
Hello, yes, Mr. May, we can hear you.
Yes, I thought we have been cut for a while, so yes.
No, we can hear you. I have requested everybody on the conference to type down any questions they may have for you, because experts like you shouldn't be let off so easily. We should make sure you answer all our questions, solve all our doubts, and make us useful citizens of the world. So what you are saying is VONG as an organization can bring about awareness by reaching out to more youngsters or speaking to more youngsters and doing ground up work like planting a single tree every year.
Exactly.
Or encouraging students to do that. Okay. So what you're saying is it does not require huge funding to do wildlife conservation.
Exactly. It requires more will. It's more will than fundings. It's more about giving will, being opened, yes, than having fundings. Because fundings without people engagement and involvement in the process bring about projects that will die after 2 years. It is exactly the question of governance. And the process your organization has, the approach that you people promote, that of raising awareness, being interested in people's wills to conserve, making that will to grow. I think that is the solution.
Okay. I have a question for you. It says, is permaculture and agroforestry the same thing?
Okay. Permaculture is cultivating mushrooms. Meanwhile, agroforestry is integrating trees into agricultural production systems. Now, mushrooms are also considered as wildlife products, so they can easily be integrated into agricultural systems and bring about supplementary and complementary services, making the system to be sustainable. What people should know is that within agroforestry, a variety of wildlife species are designed or chosen to be integrated to a system, depending on the ecological service that we expect to be added to our agricultural system. For some agricultural systems, we'll add species that add fertility. For others, we'll add tree species that enable the plant to grow on it. For some others, we'll add species that enable to bring water, fetch water from the underground and bring it up. For some other species, we'll add for some other systems will have plants bringing shelters. For others, plants fighting against the wind So it depends on the objective of the agroforestry system. Mushroom can easily be added to an agricultural production system, and you enable the increase in fertility. In such a case, mushroom cultivation into a vast agricultural system can also be considered as agroforestry. And the benefit being that we will benefit from both the regular agricultural product and also from mushroom that can be used later on.
The more you talk, Mr. May,
it brings about the production.
The more you speak, Mr. May, the more I am curious to ask you this question. Youngsters are motivated by knowledge, by involvement, by impact, yes, but youngsters are also motivated by others. So would you tell me what led you to this specific field of study? What is your journey? Please tell us.
Oh, I would say I graduated from secondary school in physics and mathematics. That's what I basically did. So I was
Mr. May, that is
myself.
not fair. Please go behind. Are you a person who grew up in a rural setup? Are you a concrete jungle person like me? What drove you to trees? What drove you to wildlife?
Yes, I grew in a rural area. I grew in a rural area, but I was not in the beginning motivated to be working in forestry. So it just came very, I just did a competitive entrance to the school and I entered there. It is after graduating from the school that my passion for wildlife came. It is after working for the first time, my first 6-month expedition in the wild. It was very difficult in the beginning, but with time, being able to face challenges, to bring about solution, to work with indigenous communities and understand their needs, being able to work with them and manage between conserving wildlife and authorizing them to hunt some very small rodents. It is all the complexity of this, working and sleeping within the bush, seeing all that interconnection that created within me the love of nature. That's the reason why I previously said that tourism is a mean to interest people to conservation. Tourism is a mean to make people understand the importance of conservation. But indeed, also working, observing leaders is also another way. I always watch TV series talking about conservation, Planet, Ushuaia TV, and some few others. Since I'm very young, I have always been attracted to all those series. And exactly, I had a particular admiration for the African Nobel Peace Prize, Wangari Maathai, for her involvement in conservation. So it is all part of the reasons that motivated me to engage myself more in conservation. So there are many reasons. It can be through a leader. It can be because of where you grew, but all those tips, all those ways we and the organizations like yours have to go through it to inspire, as of their very young age, the next generation to be involved into conservation. Most of the time, films, movies we watch, musics, do not talk about conservation. It's very rare to see a movie talking about conservation. You will see movies on physicians, movies on baristas, movies on everything, but very scarcely on conservators. Those are things that can inspire tomorrow's generation. Having more people involved and interested in conservation. Watching movie, listening to songs, having this one-to-one experience with the bush, I think those are all the things that motivate for more involvement into conservation.
Mr. May, what is that one message you would like to close with in our team? Firstly, I would like to say, before we go any further, let me be a little tactless, which I'm usually not, but I'm going to be today. I did not come into this session expecting this kind of a session. I expected to come in and talk to a scientist who is going to talk a lot of biology, which I was very bad at, always in school, and going to tell us things that are going to require me to write down and understand. I even have a pen and paper ready for that. And it turned into I am a student of economics, Mr. May, and this turned out to be a most beautiful session about culture, about so the discipline I study is also interconnected. So it's a session about nature and culture and sociology and economics, and the whole credit goes to you for making this such a wonderful session.
Thank
and
you.
for breaking it down and bringing it to such granular levels that now today everybody sitting here in this conference can put down 3 things that they can do for wildlife conservation without a moment's thought. That is how granular and so relevant you have made it for everybody. That is like fantastic, really fantastic. It requires an expert to simplify things like this.
Thank you very much.
So, Mr. May, what is that one message you would want?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What is that one message, sir, you would want the youngsters here to leave with? I would like to ask you that. If there was one message, one thing that even if they forgot the last 60 minutes of everything you said, what is that one message they should take from here?
My last message will be that everybody can do something to make sure our planet can be living tomorrow again. And the most simplest acts should not be neglected. It's all about giving it a will. The young generation, tomorrow young generation, as we all are, have their share in the decision-making of conservation. Even if they do not participate to an international conference, it's a very simple action. It comes with making ourselves concerned by ecological questions. It's all about taking a seed and planting in a tree, planting at least 1 tree per year. I think it is already much. If everybody, we are 7.7 billion on Earth, if every person could plant 1 tree per year, I think the planet will not be harmed. That will be my final message. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, Mr. May. It was a wonderful session, far beyond what we came in expecting. And it was very nice talking to you, very informational. And I would definitely like to have you with us again, if you so consent, so that we can take this message to power, make it more profound. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. It was my pleasure too. Thank you, and expect to be together next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. May.